Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of The New Standard. And you're checking out Lance Williams and Neil Coulong on November 9th, 2002. What's up, Big Neil?
It's a gorgeous day, Lance. Hopefully, weather-wise, better where you are than where I am. But we are post-election, no more ads. We're excited about that. And hey, you know what? The Steelers play this weekend. It usually is a good thing. If nothing else, we are excited about the prospect of watching our team play football again. How much fun that's been this season remains to be seen. But for me, football is football, so I'm doing well.
And we got a great show for you guys. We're going to jump into a mid-season report for the Steelers, as well as we're going to break down the upcoming matchup against the other black and gold team, the Southern variety, the New Orleans Saints, with SaintsWire.usatoday.com. And if you want to join the program and the experience, as always, you can join us on YouTube by doing a search for the New Standard. You can also go to any podcast feeder and do a search for Steelers and the New Standard. So let's jump right into it, Neil, with this midseason report. And I kind of lifted this idea for this show just from some different people, and kind of put my little spin on it. But I always think it's a good time at the bye week to kind of, take a look back at what you saw previously. I don't know if we did it that much in the last show, so I want to jump into it right now. So I want to start off and ask you a couple of questions, and I'll jump on the back half of those. So number one, what's the biggest disappointment in your opinion so far with this season?
Um, I I would probably say the overall play of the defensive line. I expected a bit more overall than what we've been getting. And it really kind of seems to be at this point that they're going to go as far as Cam Hayward can take them. And Cam has played a couple outstanding games and was not really bolstered by a whole lot around him. Larry Ogunjobi suffering an injury during his best game in Pittsburgh so far certainly doesn't help, but they're not getting great play in the middle. Montravius Adams and the fairly quickly demoted Tyson Alualu haven't really paid a lot of dividends right now. They're not getting great play out of Chris Wormley. I expected that group to be better. Honestly, I don't think I'm disappointed anywhere else, just because I don't think that any of them are playing at a level that's substantially below what I thought they would be, either individually or collectively. Meaning, like the run game, for example, I didn't expect the run game to be all that good. Run game hasn't been all that good, but it's not far off of what my expectation for them was. I thought the Steelers' defensive line would be playing a bit better than they have. I was excited about that unit going into this season.
I think when I'm talking about the biggest disappointments, I'm going to couple. Mine I think plays into yours, and I think it's the performance of the secondary. And typically a lot of times your defensive line play will impact how your secondary plays. One of the biggest disappointments, or the most disappointing thing for me, is the performance of that secondary. And I know they've had some injuries, but I believe they've given up the most big plays in the passing game in the National Football League. And I know that's not just the fault of the secondary, that it all works together. Pressure bust pipes, you're getting a good pass rush, you're getting good pass rush. It's going to impact your secondary and your ability to cover. You're going to be able to cover well and better. But that secondary just gives up big plays. It gives up a bunch of big plays. And we saw that going into the bye week against Philadelphia, as Philadelphia was able to just throw it over their heads repeatedly. Now, we have seen Witherspoon be injured, Wallace be injured, Minka's been banged up, Edmonds has even been out. But I thought this secondary would be a little bit better. In terms of a secondary disappointment, I would agree with you, Neil, with the defensive line and just their ability to get pressure. They don't get pressure, and I think they're last in the National Football League in sacks. I'll say no, they're not last. They're like seventh. They're maybe like 25th in sacks. They only have 14 sacks this year, and this is a team, of course, that's impacted by TJ Watt, but this is a team that's had plus 50 over the last 5 years. So let me jump into uh, question two. Is this disappointment correctable?
Uh, I would say yes. I mean, it's going to have to be for obvious reasons. They're not playing well. They're there to correct these things. I think that they can. I'm wondering though, after watching 8 games of it, what the ceiling is. If we want to talk about literal improvement, sure, you can improve, but the question is this going to be deck chairs on the Titanic as far as the overall issues that they have, particularly within their defense? Keep in mind, last year they got progressively worse and they fell apart at about the 2/3 mark of last season. Did they do enough to avoid that? I think they drafted DeMarvin Leal with the idea in mind that he'd be able to help them at the trickier point of the season. They tried to get younger with Adams and in demoting Alu Alu. I don't know how well that move has paid off. Cam Hayward, the amount of snaps and the amount of effort that he's had to put in, he covers the field like a defensive back. How long is he going to be able to keep that up? Are we going to see another complete and total downfall start on defense, starting with their defensive line? The prospect of that it looms. It's there. I think they can improve. I think they have to tighten up like anything. They take care of their run fits. That's usually the first thing they're going to tell you that they want to do, that they want to establish every game. And they need to, as you said, put some pressure in there to help a flailing secondary right now too. I would challenge that by saying the pressure, generally speaking, of course it's down. TJ Watt isn't on the field. He's a defensive player of the year. You had him for 7.5 games. That's not going to increase when he's gone. You expect that to increase when Watt is there, and you hope that the opportunities that Watt will help create for defensive linemen, for Terrell Austin in scheming up their defense, you hope that his presence will be able to give them a bit of a boost. So I would expect it to increase. I'm worried about how much it's going to. How much of an impact will Watt have? Will he stay healthy the entire time? Plain and simple, this defense doesn't play well if he's not on the field. We've seen it time and time again now. I'm worried about that more than anything, Lance. What is the height that Watt's going to provide? Is it going to be enough for them to compete in games again?
Spud Webb. Spud Webb might be the ceiling.
Yeah, that's unfortunately. I don't know how much. I don't know. I think I think their basement is closer to where they are right now than their ceiling is, but I don't think the ceiling is especially high either. So this is really going to come down to Watt on the field, isn't it? Where Watt's going to be. We want to make him out to be Superman because we've seen him do physically, amazing things on the field throughout his career. That wears you down over time. It's harder and harder to continue to stay at that level. He hasn't played now. What's the fatigue factor going to be? What's his game conditioning going to be like right away? You worry about these things. If he is going to be the catalyst for everything, is he going to be raring to get on the field and physically able to go at his 100%? We don't know that. We'll find out Sunday, but as of now, it has to remain a question mark.
It feels like hopefully they've worked him back in a smart way, because how that dreaded hamstring is just sitting right around the corner when a guy comes back after injury. It's a pull, It's a pop, it's a something.
Hey, and you remember last year he missed training camp and he popped his hammy early in that first game. Well, it was first game, wasn't it? He went out. He was out by halftime of that game. So
it was.
You have to worry about that. Your body does not get better at playing football by not playing football. So with that, you have to worry about his physical conditioning. It's not what he does in a weight room. It's what he's doing on the field. That's how he got hurt in the first place. He's so violent. He is so explosive. There are only so many of those movements your body is able to take. And if it's not in that shape, and you're back too early, or you're not sure if he's pushing himself trying to be He-Man to get back on the field early because his team needs him, it's admirable, but it might not help if he does something else that's going to keep him out for 2 to 3 weeks. I'm worried about that because they're not going to take him off the field. He's not going to allow them to take him off the field. I just hope he's ready for it.
Now, in terms of my disappointment, in terms of the pass defense, when I'm looking at yards per attempt, right now the Steelers rank 31st in the National League at 7.5. Only Detroit is worse at 7.8. In the last three, the Steelers have been had a number of 7.4. Of course, in the last game against Philadelphia, it was 9.7. Uh, the interesting stat here is in away games, it's 8.0. In a home game, 6.5. It's a
Oh,
yard and a half difference. And in
their away games
2021,
were against Philadelphia and Buffalo, though. That
yes,
a lot of
yes,
teams have bad away games
yes.
at Buffalo and at Philadelphia.
And it
Let's be
got
fair.
skewed. And so last year was 6.7. I mean, I think the disappointment is correctable. I think you can only play better. I mean, you can't continue to play almost NFL worst, or you probably won't continue to play NFL worst 7.5 yards per attempt. I mean, you have to get a little bit better. I think the schedule isn't as tough on the backside, so they may get some aid from their schedule. I mean, they're playing the Saints this week, and that's going to definitely help your yards per attempt unless Chris Olave goes off. But, again, like you said, what's their ceiling? Is their ceiling 6.7 yards per attempt like last year? Is it 6 yards per attempt? I don't think it's towards a league best of, 5.8 or 5.5. I think in their attempt to be the New York Jets, a team that wins with tough defense, dominant defensive line play, with the stud secondary. I just think they've come up short in that regard. But I do think that it is correctable because, hell, it shouldn't get any worse. Let me jump into this third one before we jump into our interview with SaintsWire. And maybe we'll jump into some of these again on Sunday. What would mark a successful second half of the season? It could be anything: record, development of a player. You pick it.
I think it's you just said it. Pretty much everyone's going to point to the development of Kenny Pickett. I think Kenny Pickett, people don't like this, but the reality is the Steelers' record by and large is going to rise and fall based on Pickett's ability to figure out what he is seeing defensively and react to that in real time to make plays down the field. I understand, and anybody who's watched the show knows that we did not exactly cast our votes for Matt Canada. Okay. It's not just that, though. There are opportunities on the field that Pickett is leaving.
Plenty.
There are situations in which he needs to be a lot better than he has been. In other words, I don't want to throw the bucket of cold water on people, but this ain't just Canada. Okay. It's not just about the overall direction of an offense, which isn't good. Regardless, though, when there's an open receiver on the field and your quarterback continuously is missing it, that's not on the offensive coordinator. That's on the quarterback. Okay. Kenny Pickett is not plugged into a console. Matt Canada is not controlling him on the field, telling him where to throw the ball. He has to be able to see what's there. That's how an offense works. Pickett is not doing that. Pickett is not playing well. Pickett has not played well. He hasn't played a good game yet overall, in my opinion. He's a rookie. He's new to the league. He's 20th overall, blah, 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 blah. The fact is he's not getting the job done. He's got 9 games. They're going to ride or die with him, which is fine. I have no issue with that. But he has to play a lot better, because if he doesn't, they're going to be drafting in the top 5. And at that point, there is nothing that tells me he should be your guy. Okay. Why? You just gave him an extended tryout and he was bad. Plain and simple, he was bad. If they're dropping in the top 5, I promise you, Kenny Pickett did not play well. There's no way to avoid that. If that's the case, you're looking for another guy, in my opinion. If you're going to have that high of a draft pick, and now you've got very likely 2 other picks in the top 40 to address other needs that you have, as well as a whole other draft after a whole free agency period with cap space, there's a lot of different ways that they can address the problems that they have. But if they're drafting in the top 5, they don't have a quarterback. And that's going to have to be addressed. I'm not going to bet on that, but to me, it really everything comes down to Pickett.
I agree with you. I think his development is what you're looking at, and which is going to be the key to this treading, sexy tanking rebuild plan. Because I don't think Steeler Nation cares whether it's Pickett or somebody else. They just want the next guy. And if the rebuild means you got to draft another quarterback to find the guy, and it isn't Pickett, and then that guy becomes very good and you're good in 2 to 3 years, nobody's going to care. because the Steelers will get off Kenny Pickett, get some compensation for him, and keep it moving. And I think you're absolutely right. And I think there's a confusion at times in terms of offensive coordinators, what they do, their impact, their importance. Because, like you said, if you look at the all 22, there's stuff there. There's stuff, and there's stuff that Canada is doing and calling concepts to attack certain coverages and certain scenarios and times in the game that are spot on that Kenny Pickett is missing. But the other part of the coaching part is where people should be concerned is Matt Canada training Kenny Pickett to see that stuff. What's that part of coaching? When he comes to the field, is he identifying it? Is he seeing it? Because the play concept is one thing, doing it on the field is another, trying to get from the blackboard to the grass. And that's going to be the challenge, I think, for Kenny Pickett. And so I think a successful second half for Kenny Pickett would be just more consistent play, less turnovers, being able to seem functional in an offense. Of course, you want to win games, but you want to see some more consistency, drive to drive, play to play. But let's bring in.
We got some news first, Lance.
Okay.
Can I break in with this really quick? It's announced just by the team now. The Steelers signed kicker Matthew Wright from the Chiefs practice squad after releasing Nick Skibo, who kicked in place of Chris Boswell before the bye. That move strongly indicates that Boswell is not going to be ready to go Sunday against the Saints. Wright kicked for them last year, you might recall, but probably more than anything, he had a 59-yard field goal at the end of regulation in London against the Raiders to win a game for the Jaguars last year. Very exciting moment. Very cool. That's what we remember Matthew Wright for. He has kicked with the team before, and now he is back. That probably means Boswell not expected to play as the Steelers ramp up practice in preparation for their week, what is it, 10? Week 10 game? Somebody help me out.
Don't get me counting.
Week 9 or 10 game in Pittsburgh against
10.
the Saints.
It's week 10.
And with that, I'm going to bring in John as well, Lance, if that is all right with you. We have with us the guy we like to call the man, the myth, the legend, SaintsWire editor John Sigler, who also happens to be like a 34-star chef in his own right, but a phenomenal writer, a great follow in social media. Please welcome John Sigler to the show. John, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fantastic today, man. I really appreciate the intro there. That's some high praise. Appreciate that, and glad to be on with y'all this morning.
You earned every second of it. We're gonna jump right in though. Hit you up with this. Steelers and Saints games tend to be uncomfortable ones for the Steelers. They have a little bit of trouble with the Saints. Andy Dalton being on the field gives, I think, Steelers fans a little bit of confidence going into this. How say you in all of this? This is really kind of a mediocre matchup here, isn't it?
Yeah, the Saints are in a bad spot right now. I think they picked the wrong year to go all in, considering the quarterback situation. You know, neither Andy Dalton nor Jameis Winston are very good options for this football team. And where they're at right now, it's kind of like, well, which one of them is hurting the team less? And as far as that goes, Dalton, you know, he's turning the ball over less often. He is still giving it away now. He will absolutely throw just a boneheaded interception, but he's not throwing 2 or 3 of them, and it's with frequency. So, you know, it's kind of like we're mitigating the damage here. So neither of them are very appealing, but you look at it, you know, at least Dalton, he can throw to Alvin Kamara, he can convert third downs, he can keep the offense on schedule, and that's been enough for the Saints to win a couple of games here.
Now, John, there's a little bit of pressure here because one of our listeners, Double H, said if your prediction is wrong and they're assuming you're going to pick the Saints, then you need to don your John Sigler. You should see some of the stuff he makes and make us some po' boys. So that's the challenge if your prediction is incorrect. But going into this game, is Andy Dalton still going to be the starter after the struggles of the offense against Baltimore? Is it clearly Andy's show to run for the next of the year?
I think we have him like on a 7-second delay here or something.
Are you there, John?
John, you still there, buddy? You're on mute, if that helps. This is the Steelers' offensive responses.
So
John, if you can hear us, you're on mute right now.
Yeah, if you can hear us, you're on mute.
Did we do that?
I did not do that.
I'll unmute him. No, their mic isn't connected. Here, I'll tell you what. I think we're having technical difficulties here. We're going to try to get John back in a second, but let's go over Andy Dalton. I mean, what's our favorite Andy Dalton memory from the Bengals days? And the fact that he is still in the league is both laughable and I don't know, absurd. Is that the right word for this? We obviously see a Saints team that's struggling offensively. We have other questions that we're going to ask. I'm not going to dive too deeply into it, but the fact that Andy Dalton is their quarterback really suggests they shouldn't be favored in most games. The Saints are 2.5-point favorites in this game, Lance. That's almost insulting at this point. But again, this is a game in Pittsburgh, not exactly a place the Steelers have played incredibly well, and they haven't really played well anywhere. So you can't give too much credit to that. But the Saints, the 2-6 Saints, quarterbacked by Andy Dalton, are coming into Pittsburgh as 2.5-point favorites. Am I wrong on that? Didn't I see 2.5 points of the Saints?
No, it's around 2.5. I mean, you know the reason for that. I mean, the reason for that is the offense scores 11 points a game with its starting quarterback. It's you know, it's really hard to pick a team that struggles to score and its best offensive weapon is hurt. And it looks like we've got John back in. Let's bring John back in real quickly. Hey, John, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for your patience, guys. Apologize for that. It must be an infrastructure week down here.
There's a hurricane coming. That usually affects you.
Yeah. We've been very fortunate this season. Haven't seen much of that yet, and but yeah, you never know. Just got to stay vigilant.
Very true. But give us a quick scouting report on Andy Dalton. I can't imagine Saints fans are real excited about him starting.
Not really, no. We've seen his limitations as a passer, as a quarterback in this league. He's absolutely content with living to play another down. I guess is the way we could put that charitably. He's got no issue with checking the ball down to Alvin Kamara, which has been very beneficial. You think of the Saints and their identity and, probably the face of their franchise, the offense should go through Alvin Kamara. And Andy Dalton has done a very effective job of weaponizing Kamara, putting him in a position to make a play. You just got to hope that continues against, what we know has been a pretty stout Steelers defense. So if Dalton can continue to be a facilitator with Kamara, with Chris Olave at wide receiver, I think the Saints have a chance in this game.
I mean, when you're looking at this game, is it that simple? Stop Olave, stop Kamara, you win the game. Is that what the Saints offense is just boiled down to? Like you said, weaponizing both of those players, because this is a secondary that will allow you to throw it over the top of their head. So is it just simply that? Is the familiarity of Andy Dalton with Pittsburgh, with its personnel, what it likes to do, plus Kamara and Olave, simply, if you stop that two-headed monster, you go a long way to winning this game?
Yeah, I think that's a valid take on it. I think that's probably a smart approach. The Saints, they've just been eroded by injuries. They won't have Mark Ingram in this game. They won't have Michael Thomas in this game. Right now we're crossing our fingers that Jarvis Landry will be able to play in this game. So the depth chart has just been eroded by these injuries, and it's just kind of like, gosh, last one out, turn out the lights. It's gotten pretty dire here in New Orleans, as far as the depth is concerned. So they do have some guys who can help out. Taysom Hill is someone we probably should talk about a bit, because he is, probably one of the most consistent sources of positive plays for the Saints offense, whether that's as a runner, as a receiver. I know that there's a lot of people who are just kind of baffled by the whole Taysom Hill experience. But the guy, he's a good football player, and the Saints have done a really good job of utilizing him over the last month. We didn't see quite enough out of him on Monday night against the Ravens, but hopefully they'll reverse course there, get him involved early and often, because I think they're going to need him.
This is a funny stat. I think that it's a good article for you, John. I've noticed this just because the manner in which this stat happened was particularly and very negatively remembered by Steelers fans. Were you aware Dennis Allen, who has coached as a head coach 45 games in the NFL, he's only won 11 of them. 2 of them came against Mike Tomlin's Steelers in games in which his then Oakland Raiders were at least 6-point underdogs.
That is a fantastic stat. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Wins are so far and few between for DA in his tenure as a head coach. That is inspiring. So
except against Pittsburgh, that's the problem. He beats Pittsburgh every time he plays them. Somehow, this might be the best team he's ever had going against Pittsburgh. He's needed far less to beat the Steelers in the past.
That's quite a fetter in his cap for sure. I'll have to certainly take some time to look into that a bit deeper. So, maybe he's got the mojo. He's got the formula. Maybe he's figured out how to take care of business against the Steelers, as well as he's taking care of business against Tom Brady. So maybe that'll come into effect here on Sunday.
If any of those games were in the West Coast, I was there and I watched Allen's teams beat the Steelers. I think I've seen the Steelers beat the Raiders once on the West Coast, and that was in 1995. So I'm dating myself a little bit here. But let me ask you on a particular matchup, highlight a pressure matchup that the Steelers must win to have success in the game. Is there any particular guy on that offensive line that you think the Steelers will have success against?
Yeah, the weak link right now would probably be at the right guard spot. And I say that because the guy who's been at right guard will probably be playing center in this game. That's Cesar Ruiz. He's a third-year pro out of Michigan. He really struggled through the first 2 years of his career. And to his credit, he's turned it around in a big way. And it's just in time for him to have to change positions with the starting center getting injured on Monday night. So we're going to be seeing Calvin Throckmorton will probably be filling in for Ruiz there at right guard. He's a backup. He's been a backup for a few years now. He's competent. He's fine. But when you look at the starting 5, he's the one who I would be attacking if I was Pittsburgh. I would be saying, hey, this is who we need to attack on these on stunts, on blitzes. This is who we need to kind of take advantage of here up front. So I'll be paying close attention there. Maybe Eric McCoy is able to suit up in this game after suffering a calf injury that knocked him out Monday night. I would be surprised if he returns. But if he does and Ruiz is in the lineup at right guard, I'm not worried about that so much as I am the left tackle situation with James Hurst. And he's someone the Steelers fans know well from whenever he was with the Ravens for 4 or 5, I think 6 years. He had a pretty long run there. He spent a couple of seasons for Baltimore. And he's been fine for the Saints. But when he's just fine, and then you have all pro players at right tackle, and you have a 4-time Pro Bowler at left guard, that really looks like more of a liability. So I'll be looking very carefully at the right guard spot for New Orleans and at left tackle. I'm assuming things stabilize at other positions.
Let's get into predictions a little bit here, because this game kind of just has all the feels of a mid-November Steelers are bad slog kind of game that we don't really remember all that much of a couple of years later. For me, Steelers can't score points. I mean, they're coming off of a bye. Maybe something changes, but that something probably is maximally effective on their first 2 drives of the game. Let's just say they get 14 points off of that. It'd be an absolute miracle. I don't think that they've scored touchdowns on back-to-back possessions all year. And it can't be they're one of very few teams in the league that haven't accomplished that yet, I would imagine. I don't know how many points the Steelers can score at home in New Orleans on Mars. I'm not sure that it really matters. Can they score more than 17? Do we give them 20? Maybe 20? I'm going New Orleans 23, Steelers 20, and that's optimistic. That's because they're coming off of a bye, and I think they might end up with a whopping 10 points on their first 2 drives. They'll go probably the next 5 series 3 and out, but they're going to get points in those first 2 drives. We're going to see it.
Yeah, I think that's a good take on it. It's like you said, we're mid-November. The Steelers are bad. The Saints are bad. The weather probably won't be very great, so it's probably going to be kind of a sloppy, low scoring game. With that said, I was thinking this kind of on the same lines here with you. I was thinking like a 24-20. The Saints offense can score points. The defense has not shown they can consistently keep opponents from scoring points. That shutout over the Raiders was very, very random. I don't think that it was very sustainable, as we saw against Baltimore. So I think this might be a what is the opposite of an immovable object facing an unstoppable force? We may be seeing the opposite here with
the very movable object versus the completely resistible force.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. I think that may be what we're in for with the Saints defense, Steelers offense. So I think 24-20 is probably reasonable here. I don't think either of these franchises are in very good shape right now, and I think that's going to be reflected in the product out on the field.
And so you're saying 24-20 Saints, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. I think I'll take the Saints here just because I have more confidence in their offense. Chris Olave is a stud. I think he's good for a couple big plays a game. Alvin Kamara has finally been allowed to score touchdowns again. So I think the Saints are going to have more scoring opportunities here, and I think that they do have the personnel to make the most of it.
We got a couple predictions in the chat. We got a 13-10 Steelers from Double H, and we also have a Saints 19 Steelers 16 from Iron City Beer. I think everybody has a similar feeling about this game. I don't like the matchup of just in general Dennis Allen versus Kenny Pickett. I mean, we've seen Allen do some stuff to really get after veteran quarterbacks. I'm not so sure, Kenny Pickett will do well in this game. Cal Bear, Jordan versus Chooks, Cam Jordan versus Chooks. And by the way, Cam Jordan, I believe, is a Hall of Famer. Cal will get another Hall of Famer in there. But when I'm looking at this game, especially with the changes on offense, the trading of Claypool, you have Boswell hurt, who's their best offensive player. I think this is going to be a slog of a game offensively. I like the Saints to win the game 2017. They score a late field goal. But I think it won't be too entertaining. We got another prediction here from Ollie Howard Species, Steelers 27-9. There's no scenario where I can fathom the Steelers scoring 27 points unless they get 8 turnovers in a game instead of 5, because the 5 got them 23. Maybe they need 8 turnovers to get to 27.
23 in 5 quarters. Keep that in mind.
Yes, in 5 quarters.
So with a +5 takeaway, they scored 23 points.
Yeah, so maybe if they play 69 minutes, get 8 turnovers, they can get to 27. So I'm going Saints 2017. Our guest John is going Saints 24-20. And Neil, you had what, 23-20 Steelers?
23-20 Saints.
Saints. Oh, we're going 777s here. We're going all Saints.
We have a unanimous consensus on betting on a 3-6 Saints team to beat the Steelers. That's where we are in Pittsburgh right now. And the Saints are 2.5-point favorites. I mean, you just can't get past that. I'm trying to look up the Red Rifle stats versus the Steelers here. They're not generally what one would call great.
That sounds like him.
I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing in this game is that there's a familiarity on both sides of Andy Dalton with the Steelers and the Steelers with Andy Dalton, and the Steelers have had a lot of success against Andy Dalton. So that's the interesting spice, the Old Bay, so to speak, in this game. And Old Bay is red. We do have the Red Rifle, and so that's a little seasoning in this game here is the familiarity between Tomlin and the Red Rifle or Mr. Old Bay.
Like, but, I think to John's point too, I think Andy Dalton is doing exactly and only what he is told in the effort of grabbing another $5 million off the next team. If you look at the path of quote unquote success that Dalton has had in his post Cincinnati career, he's able to extend himself and continue getting paid. Look at the market he's going to be competing against. Mitch Trubisky, probably. So to be honest, Andy Dalton's trying out for a job in Pittsburgh next year. As far as he's concerned, logically, it only makes sense. I know people aren't going to like that, but look, they're going to have to sign a veteran quarterback. And if he does well in this game, we've seen the Steelers sign the guy who played one good game in their career, and that was against them, to multiple contracts. Bruce Gradkowski, Byron Leftwich, post-Jags, Byron Leftwich. Lots of backup quarterbacks. They didn't sign Terrell Pryor, who I believe was one of the quarterbacks that Dennis Allen used to somehow stop the Steelers in that one game, one of the two games that used to make up 25% of his entire winning resume.
The Whipple Player of the Year. But hey, John, I want to thank you for hopping in. And again, John, if the Steelers win, I do want a shrimp po' boy.
I'll be happy to oblige, man.
I'm not asking for any food, John. I'm not that guy. I don't know what Lance's problem is, but we'll talk off air. We'll come up with a payment. Don't worry.
Thank you, John, for hopping on.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks for having me.
So there we have it. We're all picking the Saints, and I think you said it best.
Terrible day.
I mean, when you're picking a bad team to come on the road and beat you, that tells you kind of where you are.
Coming off a bye.
Coming off of a bye.
They're on a bye. They're at home.
Coming off of a bye.
2.5-point underdogs.
Before I get you out of here, Neil, because I know you got to go. Let me ask one last question. Is Matt Canada still calling the plays second half of the season?
I don't know. Honestly, I've said this before. Fans hate this, but whatever changes they make, yes, Tomlin's going to say all of these things. I know a couple people on Twitter in particular are going to freak out about this 2 drives into it when they don't see anything different because they don't know really what they're looking at anyway. Whatever big changes they make, most likely, because this has always been the case with this team, especially under Mike Tomlin, most likely we are not going to know what they are. Yeah. They might have done something. Play calling. It took people like 4 years to catch up to the fact that Tomlin was calling the calls. Butler did that for like 3 games, and Tomlin took it away from him when he first started. He's continued to do that. He didn't talk about that for years. You know, it's not relevant to them. They don't want to discuss it publicly, so they don't. We will have no idea who's calling the plays, but whatever it is, please don't tell me that you know the difference between Matt Canada calling plays and Mike Sullivan calling plays, because that's who it would be if it wasn't Canada. We don't know that. We don't know specifically what they're planning to do. They're a much different team without Chase Claypool. Now, I am not somebody that's saying Claypool was too valuable on the team to not trade a top 40 draft pick for him. Thank you, Chicago Bears. But that's a pretty sizable shakeup for a team that really counted on him playing that slot position this year. So we don't know what this is going to look like. We don't know what they're going to do with it. We're going to break that down after the game on Sunday when we have something of a better idea. But unless Tomlin comes out and flat out says this guy's calling the plays, odds are very good we are not going to know any internal movement that they make.
Well, it'll be Joel Friday will be calling the plays.
Could be. Could be.
Joel Friday, Jeff Saturday's cousin, will be calling the plays
or his
on
dog
Sunday.
or whatever's going on there. I'm bummed we didn't get a chance to get into that at all, Lance.
Yes, we'll comment on that. But listeners, we're going to get on out of here. Thank you guys for chiming in and joining us on another episode of The New Standard. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close the show. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe. Go Steelers.